Hello, hello. Uh, I just had this interesting experience. I got a little caught off guard. I sort of had this one idea. Hi, Sandy. Hi, Todd. David. Um, Hi, Amy. Oh, it's so exciting to see people's faces, or I guess not exactly faces, but names sort of pop up. So, whew. Um, there are a bunch of things I want to say about this idea of really like what does choose your own adventure mean on a in a moment to moment, day by day basis. And and there's this experience I had just getting ready to start is that I'd written myself a note. Well, I'd written myself like this little series of notes around this idea, and one of them said, F. Scott Fitzgerald quote, in photos, which is this way that this is a little tangent. You guys all get to just get a little snapshot into my world, such as it is. But the number of like screenshots and random photos I have saved on my phone is a little bit overwhelming, to say the least. But it's one of the places I keep ideas. And so I was like, oh man, I have to do this live and I got to go find this quote. And like, what is the quote even? And so here's what happened. I went and I actually found the picture quite quickly, and it says this: for what it's worth, it's never too late to be whoever you want to be. I hope you live a life you're proud of. And if you find you're not, I hope you have the strength to start over. It's a great quote, right? It's like this idea. It's like, oh, we can really stop in any moment and say, like, is this the life I want to be leading? Is this a life I'm proud of? It's like, and so what would I need to make it that if it's not? Anyway, I went into Google, as of course we are, want to do for these things, to try to find the quote so that I could then copy it into the text for this Facebook Live. And I found the quote, of course, that was like the thing, but actually quite quickly in there, there was a thing that was like, famous misquotations. And I was like, oh, dang it. If it, I can't put this, I can't like make a whole Facebook Live about a quote that's not actually correctly attributed. And I was trying to rush because I was a little late. So I will post the whole thing in here. For all of you, but there's a little story, and apparently that got incorrectly attributed to F. Scott Fitzgerald, and it sounds like the story is that there is a real quote, which I'll read in a moment, which was actually in the movie The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which I loved, frankly. If you haven't seen it, I think it was a great movie. I cried and cried and cried. That's always like a testament to a good movie in my book. So here's the quote. It's a little bit different, but apparently it's actually the screenplay. Like that, this quote doesn't actually exist in the play that was originally written by F. Scott Fitzgerald. It exists in the screenplay, which was written by Eric Roth, which is why it's the one that I posted. But I'm going to read it here as the starting point for what I want to talk about today. For what it's worth, it's never too late, or in my case, too early, to be whoever you want to be. There's no time limit. Start whenever you want. You can change or stay the same. There are no rules to this thing. We can make the best or worst of it. I hope you make the best of it. I hope you see things that startle you. I hope you feel things you never felt before. I hope you meet people who have a different point of view. I hope you live a life you're proud of. And if you're not, I hope you have the courage to start all over again. So it's a little different. But it carries, there's some little pieces that of course go with the movie and whatnot, but it carries like a similar energy. I actually love this piece. I love that it actually changes it to it's never too late or too early to be whoever you want to be. And I think that's actually a really key piece, because in one sense, I would say that we mostly get to do, I would say we get to do most of whatever we want to do. And there are probably some, structural limitations just to the universe we got born in. But we always get to be whoever we want to be. And in my experience, that's actually the magic. That the magic of the way we create reality around us has a lot to do with who we be, and probably a lot more to do with who we be than what we do. So I'm going to pause and backtrack here for a minute and just say welcome to everyone who's joined. And as always, please feel free to engage me in the comments. I really love the interplay. And I'm frankly, when I did the Choose Your Own Adventure, I was like, maybe I'll just show up and take questions. That would be like Choose Your Own Adventure with Kendra Kunov. Just like ask me questions and I'll just tell you what I think. So certainly on the topic, I have a few things I want to say, but I really welcome any kind of questions or comments or shares, your own personal experience. I love all of that. So please feel free to bring it. So I wrote this, I actually had this idea around Choose Your Own Adventure now several years ago, maybe. And a really good friend of mine, Kevin O'Malley, we were actually talking about leading a coaching program based on this idea. And for me, the deepest premise was actually, it's not that it's not about like, you can do whatever you want, you can be whoever you want and like achieve your goals. It's like, yes, that. And the real premise for me was that as a human being, we are wherever we are. And that I believe, and this has been my experience in life, it really came out of this kind of profound experience I had, but is that we look around us and on a spectrum, right, of consciousness, all the way from like just making kind of knee-jerk responses all the way to really well thought out, conscious, taking everything into consideration choices. But whatever it is, like really, this is happening all the time, whether we do it consciously or not. So that we are where we are, physically, emotionally, energetically, in the span of our lives, in the midst of everything. And all we get to do is decide what's the next best step. And then we take it. And what I really wanted to do inside of this program was less like, what are the 5 steps? Or how do you keep heading in that direction? Or set your compass? But it was like, great, so you took a step. Now look around and take the next best step. And again, this came from this experience that I had where I moved. And so it specifically had to do with like changing my physical location. I moved from a house I was living in to another house. And then I went through this whole thing where I was like, I made a mistake. I moved to the wrong house and now I have to move again. And it's like a backtrack. And kind of, I did like this, the internal work I did really had me land in this place where I was like, oh, I don't think I believe that we ever take steps backwards. I really believe that we always just take steps. And I was where I was. And I like, with whatever level of consciousness I had, I was like, this is my next best step. And then I got there and I was like, oh, I want to be somewhere else. And then I took what was my next best step. And it might have looked like moving back, but it was actually just the next best step, given where I was, looking at everything I wanted and the circumstances of my family. And I believe that's true for all of us. And that we have this power, really, in any moment to start exactly where we are, to do whatever is the right step, like the best possible step I can see in this moment, whether that's for my relationship or for my business or, physical location or for my family or And some of them are very small and some of them are very big, you know, and have big impact. But everything we do has some sort of impact. And then we get to pause and breathe and look around. And it's like those choose your own adventure books, right? Like, so you choose to, you know, take the path to the right and you end up on page 36. But if you took the path to the left, you end up on page 47. And then you get there and you get to read like, oh, when I took it to the right, you know, there were bears. And then you get to go like, great, so what's my next best step? No matter where, like, is it left or right or forward or backward or up or down or staying still? But this is the next best step given where I landed. Stephanie said, adventure can be a short moment in time, walk in nature to a life event. Absolutely. You know, I mean, you can take this all the way down to the microcosm, right? Of like actually setting a time where it's like, I'm just going to keep choosing which way do I go. But there's really the sense like and the same thing could be true, like a short walk in nature is like literally you could head down a certain way. And if you turn around and go back, you're just deciding which way to go next. It's not like a, you know, something to make like some big dramatic, like, oh, this, I mean, I'm saying this about myself because this is how I get, I made a mistake. But just like, oh no, I realized I wanted to turn back. So, oh, that's wonderful. Megan said she's listening to this while walking barefoot in the forest. It's like so apropos. And this is actually a perfect segue because, you know, one of the places that this came to me also was really around this idea, I like to call it, some people say something like, you know, you don't have to hold on to a mistake just because you spent a lot of time making it. And I would say you don't have to hold on to a mistake just because you spent a lot of time or money making it. And the other way I like to talk about this is like, don't fuck yourself twice. So some people don't like it when I swear, but that's, and the story that I have about that is that I think it was 2 years ago. I was super excited. It was like 2, maybe it was 3. But I bought a ticket for Wisdom 2.0. I was super excited and I was kind of like just at the point in my business where, you know, it was a stretch for me, but I was like, I can do it. And I was like excited to make the connections and be in like the realm of Wisdom 2.0 with all the other wisdompreneurs and just super excited about it. Oh, it's so funny. Mark Silver just joined and actually I met him. Well, we met before that online, but we physically met at Wisdom 2.0. And frankly, that was, there were 2 like highlights for me of going to Wisdom 2.0. And one was meeting Mark Silver. And the other was that from having bought my ticket, I ended up connecting and having the opportunity to lead at a pre-day that was for like women's wisdom leadership, something like that. And that was just freaking awesome. Like such an awesome experience. So I had a great day at the Friday pre-day. I think that was Friday or Thursday or something like that. It was like super awesome. Oh, the next day in the morning, I met Mark Silver and that was like this awesome. I was just like, just love him. And then I spent the day really at Wisdom 2.0. And throughout the day, I just got more and more overwhelmed. And there was just a lot of people and it was inside and there were a lot of people that I knew a little bit, and so like every way I turned, I was saying hi to somebody or someone was saying hi to me, but there was only a small number of people that I like really knew. I mean, super, super small. And there were just a lot of people there. And, I was like really going down, and I was like, I'm going to get the timeline like a little bit incorrect. I actually remember, and so either it was that night or it was, but the next morning, and I was like trying to talk myself into it. Like I had spent what was for me kind of a lot of money, and I had taken a whole weekend away from my kids to be there. And I was like, I have to use this to its fullest. This is like, I bought a ticket. I can't not go. And I really, like, I sort of caught myself, and I was like, this is where this thing comes in, like, don't fuck yourself twice. Like, just because I spent money that was a lot of money for me at the time doesn't mean I now have to force myself to be somewhere I don't want to be, and that's not nourishing for me and actually isn't creating what I wanted it to create. And I remember, actually, Mark, I think I posted something about this back then, and you posted a picture of you at the beach, and you were like, I did the same thing. And so I literally, it was like I gave myself permission. And I was staying with these really dear friends of mine who have a roof deck in San Francisco. And it was this glorious day. And I took a yoga mat up there, and I did yoga for like an hour. And then I lay down in the sun and I fell asleep. And I was like, oh, right. You know, I spent this money and I took this time, and I actually get to choose what I do with it. And there's nothing that says, like, just because I bought a ticket means I have to, like, go to the conference the whole time. So this is another element, I would say, of choose your own adventure, right? Like, actually in this moment, I get to decide what's best for me or my family or my life or my business. And just, again, it could be like a whole marketing plan, right? Like, it could be like, oh my God, I spent all this money on this, like, marketing and brand, and now I can't change directions because I spent all this money and time. It's like, actually you can. And I think that there's almost a way, I mean, one of the things I love about this quote is this part where he says, you can change or stay the same. There are no rules. And I think that's actually a really important piece of permission, is like, yeah, you could also keep going down that path. Like, I could have gone to Wisdom 2.0. You can stay the same. That is a choice you can make. And to give yourself permission to do that, but also to give yourself permission to not. And that you actually, I mean, the word I was going to use was obligation. And there's a part of me that wants to remove that because I don't like obligation. And there's another part of me that actually does believe that. That's like, we who become aware, or we who have an awakeness, and I don't mean that like I'm more woke than you. I mean, like, when we're awake to ourselves, there's almost an obligation to actually pay attention and be willing to be the ones who stop and say, oh no, this isn't it anymore. Maybe I made a mistake and I shouldn't have done it in the first place, or maybe that choice got me to right here in this spot, and now I choose differently, standing exactly where I am with new information and a new vista around me, and it's like I choose differently. And it's kind of my last point, which was like, it's okay to change your mind. So I want to check on some of the comments, and then we can talk about changing our minds. I just love that you showed up, Mark, like right as I was talking about that exact Wisdom 2.0 conference. Stephanie said, like, eating food you don't like just because you bought it. Totally. That's a big one. And we can come up with really good rationale, right? Like wasting food and you know, again, like, we live by our values. So maybe it's like a deep enough value that I'm like, I'm going to find a way to have this food be eaten. But there's another way. I think moms do this. Like, we feed our kids something and then they leave weird little bits on their plate, and then we just like eat it because it's left over. And I remember catching myself doing that. I was like, why am I eating bread crusts? Because like my children didn't eat their bread crusts. Like, this is disgusting. And so it's like, it takes a certain awareness. And I really do mean that. Again, it's not like, oh, I'm like more aware than you, or you're more aware than them or something. But like, the more we become aware of ourselves is like being willing to actually make those choices. And then Megan said, that's the story of choosing to step out of my nursing career. LOL, don't fuck yourself twice. but I have student loans, and I invested all that time in school, but it's not aligned with me, so I choose not to. Absolutely. And I mean, that's the perfect example, again, of I worked with a client actually one time, and she was shifting out of, she was trained in psychotherapy, and she was shifting into coaching. And I'm not saying this is true for you, Megan, but it was a beautiful kind of segue into this piece of where she was also looking at it as all or nothing. And I remember bringing to her and I was like, or you could say like, I will only work with 3 psychotherapy clients a week because that supports me in a way that allows me to do what will nourish me and to actually give my time to shifting into what I really want to do, the ways I really want to work with people. Whereas for her, like if she just gave that up completely, there wasn't the solidity that she needed. It kind of fritzed her out and it didn't make her the most effective. So again, what I love kind of in this quote and then this idea, like choose your own adventure, is like you really get to say, you don't have to not be a nurse at all, or only be a nurse because you have student loans, or do these. It's like I could choose to do this much of this and this much of this and this much of this, and like it's like a recipe, and kind of like I said at the beginning. Actually, I'm going to play with this analogy here for a minute. Is like there are some rules to cooking where if you don't follow them at all, like things might get a little weird, especially baking, right? Baking is a little finicky, but you don't have to follow the recipe exactly. Or you can like take the walnuts out because you don't like walnuts, or put in more cinnamon because you love cinnamon. Like you actually get to play with these things. So beautiful example, Megan, of like, right, like I spent all this time and money and I have student loans. So now I'm like I have to stay, I'm indebted and like stuck in something that isn't going to work for me in my life. And then Shelly, hello, Shelly. I love you. She said, such a great distinction. Thank you. We can take care of ourselves in all sorts of ways. One of my challenges is reading what is most nourishing in the moment while also remaining committed to my larger goals. Such a balancing act. I wonder if what you mean by that is reading, like literally reading, like you want to read novels and you think you should be reading personal growth, or if you mean reading like paying attention to like what's like, I just feel like this in the moment versus this is what will deeply nourish me. I'm just going to speak to both. So one is, and this is just a super light comment, but it's basically like, I've realized I really need novels at nighttime. Otherwise, I'll do things like watch Netflix for, 3 hours at night. I feel a little embarrassed admitting that, but it's super important for me to have really decompressed time. And so novels at night, because I just like so not interested in business or personal growth or, coaching books or something like that at night. But the other piece of like reading as in being able to tell internally for myself, like, wait, is this just a whim and I just don't feel like it? Or is this kind of a deeper, like nourishing piece where I can give something up and then also stay committed to larger goals? And I really think there is kind of, as Shelley was talking about, like I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with the word balance, but it's like that takes time. And it takes being with ourselves, and it takes the willingness to make mistakes. So I think we learn the most, I believe that there is no like, okay, I'm going to figure this all out and get, and like, so that I can then get it right and never make the wrong decision. And that actually we learn the most by doing and being like, oh, that actually took me away from what I want most. And that is, in some way, that's actually the essence of what I'm talking about, is like, can I make this decision? And then actually, it doesn't have to take a lot of time, right? But it's being willing to put in the time and attention to pause and go like, So what impact did that have? Where did that actually take me? I, blew off work for the afternoon and got my nails done. Like, okay, how do I actually feel? Was that like, oh man, I so needed nothing to do with work and I can actually tell because of how I feel? Or was that like, ooh, I was just avoiding the hard things and I actually feel worse now? And not worse, just like, oh, I feel a little guilty about it because I'm not supposed to, but like, I think we can tell, but we have to be willing to try things and then pay attention to the impact. And a couple of years ago, I was working with a coach and we started working with this idea of, for me, it was spaciousness, but it was making spaciousness my compass. And like literally this point of orientation. And that for me, that had a physical resonance, like the feeling inside me. Do I feel spacious? It's not like, am I happy? Or, is this what I want to do? It was like this, I could actually orient in a physical response way to like, what do I need to do right now in order to feel more spacious in my life? And when I started paying attention to that and making decisions based on that as an orientation, like as a compass, literally, it was amazing. I mean, I could tell, I'd be like, oh, I need to write copy for my website and I need to return these 2 calls. And that is literally the thing that will have me feel spacious. And then other mornings, I could tell, I was like, oh, I need to go for a 10-minute walk before I do anything. And then I will know what's next. So I would say there's really something valuable in finding what is your compass that you can feel. And then be willing to make mistakes. Go like, oh, that didn't actually do it. That's okay. Now I get to make the next best step. Thanks, Mark. Okay, cool, Shelley. Well, hopefully I was able to respond to that a little bit than the last one. And then Stephanie said, I think transitions in life are a great time to cherry pick adventure. I totally agree. And there are some that are really like out there and very clear. Those of us who are mothers or parents, again, like our children go to college, like big transition, time of choice. We move, right? That's a transition. Or some of them are handed to us almost. And then actually the reason that I wanted to speak to this is that I believe that every day has that opportunity. Again, in little and big ways. But we are every day making choices that actually put us in a new spot where we then get to go like, oh, okay, from right here, what's the next best step? Oh, and again, some of it's really moment to moment. Some of it is like I make a choice in a day and I'm like, oh, now I need to make another big choice. And sometimes I think about it like a little example is that yesterday I chose to do a bunch of errands after picking my daughter up. And we sort of hit a point where she was at her limit. And I had to choose, are we going to finish our errands and get her home, or am I going to kind of call this off because I can tell she's at her limit? Or am I like, how am I going to relate to this? And I was like, I actually think our family is going to be served by doing the errands, but I'm taking responsibility for that. So I'm not going to be resentful that she's whining when we're in the store to get crickets for our gecko because we've been out too long. Is like, I'm going to understand that I made a choice that I think is going to benefit our family overall for the rest of the week. And it's going to have an impact. And I actually take responsibility for that choice. And then when she starts melting down in the pet store, like I can be with it because I've already made that choice. I'm not like, ugh, I already told you we had to get crickets. You knew, right? She's 5 and I'm going to. So anyway, that's just a little example. Megan, I love that you're extracting your own flavor of wisdom. Yes, that's a great catch. Right, I had my own like wisdom 2.0 experience. Thank you, Megan. Marcella, so happy to see you here. She said, yes, let's live our lives rather than producing an image of one. Yeah, and again, like I think for Marcel, it's like sometimes it's even an image for ourselves, right? Like sometimes we're aware that we're putting an image out, like this is what a good life looks like, but sometimes it's in too. It's like, okay, I'm living the right life. And so it's about actually like, okay, am I willing to give that up both in the external, the way it looks out there, but also for myself. And sometimes that's the harder one. You're welcome, Shelley. I adore you. And Marcella said, thank you for the space compass distinction. Oh, beautiful. Okay, I think I got the comments, which was really great. I always just adore the interplay here. So thank you for those of you who have brought like shares and questions. And I want to touch base on this idea of changing our mind directly, because I think it's really important. And then I'm going to sign off here in about 5 minutes. So any last shares or questions that you have, I'd really welcome them now. But there's, sometimes it's like we make a mistake. And that can be a really important thing to recognize, right? Like, I actually think this is one of the things that gets lost in the like everything happens for a reason conversation, which I don't think is wrong. But I think held inside everything happens for a reason, we can actually, like that distinction can be large enough to hold, I made a mistake. Oh, I didn't take this into consideration, or I made a mistake. Where was this coming up recently? Oh, it was around shame and regret. And I was teaching a women's weekend, and a woman talked about releasing shame, and I was saying, yeah, I was aligning with her, saying resonance around this idea that we don't have to feel shame about things. And then another woman, an older woman, actually said, well, isn't shame useful? And this is a whole other conversation, and maybe I'll bring it into another live, but I want to put it in this realm of like making mistakes and everything happening for a reason, or like, do I have regrets? And my response around that was like, I think you're talking about like embarrassment or guilt or regret, which can teach us lessons. The willingness to actually say like, oh, I regret that, rather than like, well, I guess it just happened for a reason. That the key piece of saying like, oh, I regret doing that, or I wish I had spoken differently, or so anything like that, that's actually what gives us key information to make better decisions next time. Again, not so that we're perfect or we never make mistakes, but it goes like, oh, this is, I found a value of mine, or I discovered something, and now I can make even better decisions going forward. And shame, I think, is a different thing. But I do believe that in some of what I think is a beautiful cultural conversation around releasing shame, something that's been lost is the actual value of being able to admit that we made a mistake, or I regret that. And frankly, if I look at, like, I have regrets in my life. I have real regrets. They are almost to a one. They're regrets about not treating people with the kind of care that I want to treat people with. And I think it's okay to say, wow, that was a mistake. I wish I had not behaved in that way. And one of the things that allows us to do is actually change our mind, like change how we relate to somebody. Or, I think about also a woman, a client of mine who was talking about, she ended up out to dinner. She didn't end up, right? She went out to dinner with a guy, and then it started to feel creepy. And when she talked about it, she could say like, oh, there were things in leading up to dinner that actually were signals. And is it her fault that he was acting creepy? Absolutely not. That is on him. However, going forward, it actually is valuable to her to be able to say like, oh, it was a mistake to not pay attention to these things going forward. Or even in that moment, to be able to say, oh, it was a mistake to choose to come to dinner. I would like to change my mind and leave now. Like, we get to do that. You actually get to change your mind. It doesn't even have to be that circumstances change or these things. Like, you can literally go like, oh, I just realized I don't want to be here. So there's a lot of nuance to that. And, but I did want to just bring in this piece of that it's okay to change your mind as a really key piece of this idea around choose your own adventure. It goes under what I talk about with sacred sovereignty, like, and yeah, I think that's what I want to say about that. So again, I really thank you for those of you who were here live, and I really appreciated the dialogue. That's always my favorite part. If you're watching the replay and there are other pieces that are coming in as questions or shares, I really welcome that. I love that. I'll come back and have a written dialogue with you. And I think more than anything, I wanted to bring this forward into this sense of like, even to bring into a little bit more the forefront of consciousness, this idea of like, oh, I get to choose. And kind of like no matter what decisions I made leading up to this moment, no matter how much time or money I spent on it, no matter, if I made a mistake, no matter if I'm changing my mind, like actually I get to choose. You get to choose. And then let it be an adventure. So thank you again for your time, for your attention. Thank you, Stephanie. Feels like it feels like a generosity on your part, and I'm grateful. And I wish you a beautiful day, however you choose to have it. Ciao.